Hello, everyone. Welcome back to For the Girls. We hope you enjoyed our earlier episode this week, the Carlos deep dive. We had so much fun doing it. A lot of you guys wrote in, said that you really liked it. So let us know if you want to see any other driver previews. It's so fun for us, and we'll be happy to do some other ones. As a reminder, please rate and review the podcast wherever your podcast. It's really, really helpful for us. And with that, we'll jump into our Chinese Grand Prix preview because we have a lot to talk about. It's the first time we've been back to this race in 5 years. I'm Chessa.
And I'm Tiggy. Okay, yes, first time for the Chinese Grand Prix since 2019. The race fell off the calendar from 2020 to 2023 due to the pandemic, and lots has changed since then. So we thought we'd go through a couple things that were true in 2019 and not true anymore, or things that have changed. So since 2019, we now have ground effect cars. This is the first time racing at this track since the new regulations. Racing Point, yes, Racing Point have become Aston Martin. Renault have become Alpine. Alfa Romeo have become Steak Kick Team Sauber. Toro Rosso became AlphaTauri and now VCarb. Kimi Räikkönen and Vettel retired. Alonso has returned from retirement, and that's not even scratching the surface, but it's pretty crazy how much can change in 5 years.
The world is abuzz. Everyone is waiting and very excited to come back to this track. And it's like, think about it. No team has had a chance to test their car at this track. So take that with a grain of salt, but people are excited for a potential mix-up. And this is also our first sprint race of the season, which is also really exciting. A lot of teams look forward to that because it can help reshuffle the order, and the midfield teams kind of get excited to maybe punch above their weight up at the top. But as a reminder, this is a new sprint format that puts FP1 and the sprint shootout, which is quali for the sprint race, on Friday. And then the sprint race and race quali on Saturday. And then the race will be on Sunday as usual. And so as a reminder, the reason for this new format is to ensure that Parc Fermé can be reopened between the sprint race and the Grand Prix quali, allowing for any, necessary pre-race changes or setups that you've learned from the sprint and take them into quali and then the race. There were issues last year where Parc Fermé was essentially locked in on Friday, and then there were instances of drivers having to make changes, having penalties, sacrificing their positions for the race on Sunday due to that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think we've definitely seen some driver comments being like, this is a little questionable to hold a sprint race at the first time we've raced at this track in 5 years. So I think drivers are thinking it's a little potentially could be reckless, could lead to some damage. It's definitely a lot to throw at the drivers after not having raced here in a long time. And many drivers, the newer ones, haven't raced here at all. So definitely going to be an interesting weekend. But that being said, it's the first time we have a full-time Chinese F1 driver having his home race here. So yay, Zhou Guanyu. So very excited for him. This is going to be at the Shanghai International Circuit. It's 5.4 kilometers, 56 laps, 2 DRS zones. And what is so cool, this is one of my favorite fun facts, having studied Chinese since I was 8 years old. When watching the race this weekend, look out for the aerial shots of the track. It's designed to look like the Chinese character for Shang, which means upwards. So Shanghai is like literally upon the sea. But it's really cool. If you look at the aerial shots of the track and look at the character Shang, it kind of looks similar. So super cool.
I love that. Petition to have more tracks have more symbolism like that. That's really amazing. The track itself, besides having a sick aerial view, is going to be really cool. So expect a very exciting start. It basically has 3 back-to-back turns that get narrower, tighter, and tighter. And then drivers also love turns 7 and 8 since they're long, winding, and super high G-force. And then the circuit also features one of the longest straights on the calendar. It's 1.2 kilometers and then ends with a hairpin at turns 14 and 15. And this is a tough track. Apparently, it's a killer on the tires. And Albon once described it as having, quote, 1,000 racing lines. So in terms of the setups, we will see teams are going to have an interesting time balancing a low downforce setup to help maximize that long straight and go as fast as they can, while also sticking to some medium and high downforce setup options to manage tire drag on this super twisty track that has a lot of different turns.
I'm hoping for some good action. That long straight, there are a couple long straights, but that one is going to be insane.
I'm most excited for all these different turns. I feel like some teams do really well on these kinds of turns, some don't. And I think we'll see a lot of different shakeups.
Yeah, I love the graphic they do where they show who's winning in which part of the lap. And I think it's going to be
Yeah.
really interesting on this track. For a little bit of history, so the track was built in 2003 in the suburban Jiading district, which is northwest of Shanghai. It only took 18 months to build, had its first race in 2004, and it was also the most expensive track in F1 to be built until Abu Dhabi was built later. But it's crazy, but the lap record is still held by Michael Schumacher from the first Chinese Grand Prix in 2004. And the track also has history and is home to major F1 moments for our F1 lore fans out there. So, Daniel Ricciardo's impressive P6 to P1 win in 2018. This race was full of controversy, had tons of overtaking, so worth a rewatch if you're into that. This is also the race where Hamilton got beached in the gravel trap in 2007 when he was on the verge of winning the championship in his rookie season, and he ended up losing out to Raikkonen by only 1 point. So wild, lots of moments here.
Yeah, this track was the good for the Mercedes glory days. Tiggy, you'll love this. And speaking of which, let's talk about the last race here, which was, of course, in 2019. The race itself was actually, in and of itself, a very important race. It was the 1,000th race ever. And so it was actually cute when you see, or if you rewatch the race and the start, the the lights up at the top have like 1,000 at the top. It was like the 1,000 start. It was a whole big deal. But it was also in the era of the Mercedes glory days. So that race in 2019 was Mercedes' third 1-2 finish of the season in just as many races, with Lewis finishing first and Bottas second. But fun fact, at the start of this race in 2019, Bottas was actually 1 point ahead of Hamilton in the 2019 World Drivers' Championship. To round out the rest of that race, Vettel, who was driving Ferrari at the time, he rounded out the podium in third. Max finished P4 just ahead of Charles in the Ferrari in P5, and then Max's teammate, then Red Bull teammate Pierre Gasly was in P6. And then shout out for Albon at this race. He was driving with Toro Rosso at the time, and he had a pit lane to P10 finish with a one stopper, which was just insane, and he got driver of the day.
Love that. So for the teams, Red Bull is definitely looking to prove they can maintain their solid lead out in front, especially with Ferrari's strong performance kind of nipping at their heels. Maybe that's a little bit too generous to Ferrari. I don't know if they're exactly nipping at their heels, but
they are relatively speaking to, and
relatively. In a press interview this week, Horner did what Horner does, sandbagged a bit, and with the expectation that this track will be tough on their tires, plus the challenge of the sprint format, he said it will be interesting to see how that goes. Well, we'll see about that.
Every race for Red Bull will be interesting to see how it goes, and it never is interesting except for when Max DNF'd.
Well, it's interesting to them winning by 30 plus seconds. But Checo, he is notoriously great at managing tricky tire situations, so expecting great things from him here, hopefully. He's definitely off swinging in this season, so we hope that he keeps that up.
Yeah, I really hope it plays in his favor. For Ferrari, I think the big thing to talk about here is the buzz around Carlos and where he's going to end up next year. It's nonstop. It's going to be all consuming this weekend. I feel like it's going to be all people are going to be able to talk about in the press conferences. So, of course, hopefully that won't distract Carlos too much, and we're rooting for him to have a heroic drive. But I think what's insane is the amount of rumors that I've been searching the interwebs, collecting the Carlos rumors for next year, and the big thing that seems to be like solidified, even though it's not real yet, is that Carlos will drive for Mercedes. But I heard an insane rumor that I literally want nothing to do with. Maybe I want to hear your thoughts. Is that Carlos could end up at Williams?
I don't see that. I think.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I think Sainz would go to Mercedes over Williams.
Yeah.
I also think he would go to Sauber over Williams. I think he would. Yeah, I think there are a lot of seats he would probably take.
I think Williams wants Carlos.
Of course they do. Everybody wants Carlos.
Carlos is the litter.
Yeah. I think Mercedes, Red Bull, or Sauber are probably the most likely options. But I mean, keep throwing the rumors out. We'll see.
It's fun.
People will talk. For Mercedes, speaking of which, so after a tough weekend at the Japanese Grand Prix, Toto said the team was in a, quote, rebuild phase as they struggle to figure out just why the car can't keep up as expected, why it's so unpredictable. They do seem to be getting there, although they say this lots, but Toto is still somewhat optimistic that they are closer to unlocking the pace they need. They have been doing well this season on corners, like the ones we'll see at the circuit this weekend. Plus, with the medium to high downforce setup they'll have this weekend, we're excited to potentially see some better performance from the team. I personally would really love to see the morale boost for George and Lewis, but here's to hoping we can get at least one driver in the top 5. Hopefully, I can't believe we're even saying that, but
I cannot believe
hopefully,
we're praying for this now. It's so important.
hopefully a podium. Let's just throw it out there.
Okay, I'm going to pray for at least top 5 because something is better than nothing. But Tiggy, I commend that.
Double podium, double win. Mercedes won too.
Speaking of trying to do your best, let's talk about Alpine. So as we've said, I think for the last 3, every single race we've said, okay, Alpine only has up to go from here. And it is indeed continuing to be true. So they finished P15 and P16 in Japan, which was second and third last place with the DNFs. Not great, but they did have a few upgrades that they brought in Japan that did help them a bit in terms of quali pace, which of course did not translate to race pace as we saw. But hopefully, they'll be riding off the back of those upgrades. And they also fast-tracked a floor upgrade for this weekend. They were supposed to bring it in Miami. They fast-tracked it so they can have it this weekend in hopes of turning things around. So Ocon will be getting that, and then both drivers will have it by Miami.
Perfect. For McLaren, Oscar, his first time at the track. This may be a trickier weekend for McLaren based on the layout. The first and third sectors are full of those slow speed corners, which haven't been a huge strong suit for the team this year. Andrea Stella, the team principal, said this weekend was going to be damage limitation, which we'll see if that's sandbagging or not, but wow.
I would not want my team principal to be like, let's just try to stay alive this weekend.
Yeah.
Damage limitation.
They are waiting to bring their first big upgrade of the season in Miami, and they're targeting that weekend for a more optimistic outlook. But I have faith. I think McLaren will hopefully look good this weekend. Yeah.
And I don't think it's very I feel like in F1, you try to extract as much as you can out of every race weekend, no matter what. And it's kind of strange for a team principal to say, we're just going to do our best. And then we know that by Miami, hopefully things will turn around. So I think Lando and Oscar always have the right headspace and will be able to do everything that they can.
Yeah, it's like Io Komatsu saying that they're going to be in last all the time, and then Haas is coming out swinging, as Chessa loves to say, a midfield team.
Midfield team of the 2024 season. All right, let's talk about Stake, Sauber, Kick, this whole big new team. Anyways, it is Zhou's first home race, which is really exciting. And like we said, this is the first time we've had a full-time Chinese F1 driver racing in China. So the home pride, the home energy is going to be absolutely electric, and hopefully will buoy him into having an incredible race. And again, like we said, sprint weekends are always a really good time for the lower half of the grid to be a little bit extra optimistic about any potential shakeup of the order that they could capitalize on. The team, again, generally optimistic. They said that they can feel their car improving with every race and know they're going to be able to eventually string everything together and extract a good result. So I hope it's this weekend for Zhou.
Yeah, same. I'm really crossing my fingers for Zhou. It's been awesome to see his Instagram posts and all the support that he gets at home, all the events he's been to, and all the fans. I've seen a lot of vintage Alfa Romeo jerseys in China, which is cool.
True.
And I have a friend who's over there right now saying that it's just the buzz is insane, that everybody's talking about it.
Going to the Grand Prix?
No, unfortunately not, but still super cool.
Amazing.
For V-Carb, this is also Yuki's first time at this track, and Danny will be getting an entire new chassis this weekend, but apparently it's not an update meant to help Danny with his performance issues this season. Their sporting director said, quote, "It's a happy accident that we have one coming. It makes sense to give it to Daniel, but we're not bringing a new chassis because of his issues. Let me be clear about that. It's just that it all fits together."
It's so confusing.
Very strange messaging there, but
apparently there's a little bit of an undercurrent that Danny has been dissatisfied with his car, which is fair. I think if you're not performing the way you want to, you're trying to figure out all the different reasons why you might not be. And so, like you said, it's like a happy accident. So maybe, Danny will get some sort of placebo effect and it'll help him mentally.
There is no such thing as a happy accident in Formula One. I'm sorry. But anyway, in case you missed our latest Instagram video on the cost of an F1 car, check that out. A new chassis can cost as much as $700,000. So This may be a wild rumor, but people are also saying that if Danny can't pull a great performance out of the hat this weekend, it could be one of his last. We've talked about this a little before. Will he get replaced midseason? Would he? Definitely wouldn't be out of character for Red Bull to swap a driver out midseason. When we were talking about when we did our Carlos deep dive, if you haven't listened to that, we were going through like all the Red Bull drops midseason, which definitely happens. But 5 races in is probably a bit too soon. They gave De Vries 10 races, so I don't know. It's a little. I don't buy this rumor quite yet, but I do feel like Danny definitely has some pressure on his shoulders to
Yeah.
perform, and especially with someone the caliber of Liam Lawson,
I
kind of
mean,
breathing down his neck.
I would not say no to having Liam race in Miami. I think that would be so fun. But yeah, I think 5 races is a little bit too soon, and they'll have to give him like maybe 7. Who knows?
Maybe 7.
I don't know.
Harsh.
7.5 races in the middle of 5 and 10.
Pit stop, swap the drivers.
Pull him right out of the chassis and throw a new one in. For Haas, my favorite midfield team, they have been doing a good job this season, of course, relatively speaking. And they're definitely feeling confident going into China. They narrowly missed points in Japan. Hulk ended up in P11, but they seemed really excited and motivated by that. And they're also bringing pretty significant updates or upgrades this weekend. They're bringing a new floor, some bodywork refinements to help them maximize on the high-speed sections of this track that we've talked about. And then they will also be bringing more upgrades to the Emilia-Romagna GP. So go Haas. Can't wait to see them get some points this weekend.
Woohoo. For Aston Martin, this is Alonso's first race here in 6 years after re-signing the longest contract he's ever signed in his career with Aston Martin. So hopefully we'll keep the good vibes rolling. A fun fact that is kind of irrelevant to the race, but interesting nonetheless, is that next year he will surpass Michael Schumacher to become the oldest driver to start a Grand Prix in 50 years. So
wow.
Alonso just keeps it going.
Yeah, with this longest contract, we're going to lock that stat right in.
Oh, yeah. He's got 10 more years. After bringing a big upgrade to the Japanese Grand Prix, the team saw some improvement to race pace that they'll be looking to maintain this weekend in China. Let's see how Alonso does. Let's see how Stroll does. But yeah, looking good for them. We had a lot of hot takes in the Carlos deep dive about Aston Martin, if you haven't listened yet, but we won't spoil that here.
The talk of the town is that Aston Martin and Mercedes are going to be bringing basically the exact same package this weekend. So you better look out. Might be coming up ahead of Mercedes. Okay, for Williams, this is also Logan's first time at the track, which is very exciting. We had a lot of rookies between now and 2019. So that's good for him. What's not so good for him is the mounting pressure for him to continue to perform. The team is reportedly exploring alternatives for the 2025 season, which does not surprise us at all. But what would be interesting is if they maybe switched him out sooner. It would not be like Williams to switch out a driver midseason, as at least not with recent history sort of supporting that. But people are saying that maybe Bottas could drive for Williams next year. I think if it wasn't for the stake to Audi switch in 2026, that would be a really good option. Remember, Bottas used to drive for Williams, so that would be fun. But I think I don't think Bottas actually would replace Logan because of this whole Audi situation. It's too enticing to keep people at stake right now.
Also, what is the incentive for Bottas to go to Williams? Like, why would he want to do that? I don't really see that happening personally, but it's always interesting to see where the chips may fall. I think something that is potentially more likely, although we'll see where Toto's brain is at, but if Toto wants to put Kimi Antonelli in the Williams for next year to give him 1 year before the 2026 regs, the reason why that wouldn't make sense is because Kimi Antonelli, so young, would have to learn one team for a year, switch regs, then learn a whole new team. I feel like Toto may want to just take the risk on Kimi Antonelli and the Mercedes, so he has a little bit of continuity for 25 into 26, but that could also be too soon, depending on how he does in F2. He is very young, so I don't know, but I could see that potentially being an option for Williams, is having Kimi Antonelli and developing him for a year ahead of 2026 if he goes to Mercedes.
The options are endless. The permutations are endless. This is why we have so much to talk about. It's so great. Last thing on Williams, the team still does not have a spare chassis. So the debacle continues. They actually won't have it until Miami, which is just one race away. So continued pressure on both Albon and Sargent to perform, especially at this new track. I really hope there's no issues getting used to the track.
Ugh, I know. It's really, really stressful, especially with a sprint weekend. It makes my skin crawl, like feeling like they are not going to have options, but let's hope for the best. For our hot takes and predictions, I am going to go with Zhou Guanyu scoring points at home. We had that with Yuki last race at his home race, so I'm hoping to keep the good vibes rolling. Let's have Zhou score points at home. I would love to see that support and to see that for
Definitely.
him. So fingers crossed there.
All right, I'm going to get real specific on this one. Max P1, as much as it pains me, as per usual. Carlos P2 and Alonso P3.
Wow, very specific. What happens to Checo?
Um, I don't know. I just thought about the podium P4. I get
Okay.
this one right. I think whenever someone does a really specific hot take, like a specific podium, we need to up the stakes and like Tiggy, you have to buy me dinner if I get this right. And then
Okay.
next preview, if you get a really specific one right, I will buy you dinner and vice
Okay. That's a deal. Although my track record is not good. I don't think I've gotten a hot take right in years.
I don't think any of actually, I got a really good one last time, but that was basically it.
All right, deal. For news this week, F1 has released the 2025 calendar for what will be the 75th F1 World Championship, 24 races again, which ties the record for this year. But Australia is going to be the season opener, and the energy is just going to be electric. We talked so much about how amazing the energy seemed at Australia, and that's definitely high on our list to go to. So, super happy that that's going to be the opener. Bahrain and the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix will be in April to accommodate Ramadan, which will be in March next year. And then similar co-geolocation with Japan and China coupled together in the spring, the European races in the summer as usual, and the US and Mexico Grand Prix in the fall. So not a big change from this year to next year, I don't think, but
Yeah.
I will see what happens in 2026 with the new regs.
A whole new calendar, all 2026, 24 new races, 26 new races in 2026.
No, please, not 20, not 26
Can you
races.
imagine? So another news item, Andretti is planning to enter F2 and F3 in order to create a talent ladder to help feed its still unconfirmed Formula One team with the goal of kind of helping the American driver pipeline to F1. They have new facilities that they've built in Silverstone with the hope of creating sort of a welcoming environment for developing drivers coming over from the US. And Andretti said, quote, normally when an American comes over here, they're not treated the same. So I love that mentality. And again, I think it's really nice that Andretti is trying to get American drivers into the European F1 pipeline, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm so interested to see if and how that works because I think it's definitely a true phenomenon that when Americans go over to Europe, they're not treated the same necessarily,
Mhm.
but that feels like a tall order to change quickly. So we'll see what happens. And other news, so Formula One has released its first impact report and it looks promising. They say the sport is on target to meet the goals set out to reach net carbon zero by 2030. The latest carbon footprint calculations show a 13% reduction in the sport's carbon footprint compared to 2018. So at least that's a step forward. I personally am just super happy that they're formalizing
Yeah.
reporting. We've definitely covered in detail the Mercedes sustainability report, the McLaren sustainability report. Not all teams do this, so I'm happy that F1 as a sport, overall is hopefully setting the standard alongside Mercedes and McLaren with this. And so I'm hoping to see other teams start to do the same.
Agreed. Other news items, the Mercedes parent company has reported an almost 550 million pound turnover for 2023, and this is the first time an F1 team has exceeded that number. That's a 72 million pound increase since it was last reported in 2022, and they're kind of attributing that higher growth to higher commercial and sponsorship revenues. So Toto, ever the businessman, trying to crank out some extra cash and make the team grow where he can. For reference, this is a really big number. Red Bull's turnover in 2022 was 386 million pounds. And of course, for Mercedes, this higher figure that they just reported does also account for the updated chassis and updated investments they had to make for their 2024 car this year.
And for anyone who's not aware what a turnover is, it's basically net sales. So it's not a sales number strictly, but it's net sales. So interesting. I will note that this is parent companies. So this is the Mercedes parent company, Red Bull parent company. So there's a lot more that goes into obviously those numbers than just F1, but still interesting. nonetheless.
Big bucks.
Lastly, the Italian media are in a frenzy after Newey was spotted paparazzi style in Italy. Could a Ferrari switch be in the cards for him? The rumors are flying with Adrian Newey, with
I love the
Aston
Italian.
Martin, with Ferrari. It's everywhere. Will Newey go anywhere? We don't know, but it's fun to speculate. And with that, we can't wait to watch the race this weekend. We will catch you on the other side. And reminder to rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and speak soon.